Welcome, friends and fellow bibliophiles. Those of you that are new to my channel, I'm Kat of Kat's Novel Adventures, and I am being joined today by my lovely friend Jen at Literary Love. We are here today to discuss the short story, The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. And if you happen to be new to my like watching this on replay, not new, but you could be new and watching on replay also. Thank you so much for watching it after the fact. We appreciate you supporting my channel, the Nevermore Readathon, Jen at Literary Love, and myself. But before we get started on this adventure, tell us a little bit about yourself, Jen, and your channel.
Hi, I'm Jen. You can find me at Literary Love 123 on YouTube, Instagram, and Threads. And if you have middle school or high school students who are interested in literature, mythology, folklore, and poetry, you can find my classes under Jennifer Smith at OutSchool. And I'm so excited to be here with Kat today. She's one of my favorite people, and we get to talk about a mutual love of ours, and that is Edgar Allan Poe.
Yes, I am super excited about this. I love the writing of Edgar Allan Poe and just have enjoyed exploring his work more. And that's where the brainchild for the Nevermore Readathon came about. You know, it's just spending a week with Poe, you know, trying to read some things that I have not read by him before. This week I spent time reading more poetry, and I'm reading a biography. I haven't finished yet. My week with Poe is actually going to extend. I'm going to be reading Poe probably till the end of January, just because I've been so busy. Did you read anything new by Poe this week, or it just,
I'm really kind of revisiting a lot of the same stories. I'm currently on week 3 of teaching a semester class of Poe on my OutSchool platform. So I've really been revisiting for this week Annabelle Lee and the Telltale Heart and the Black Cat. So kind of revisiting, but there are still some things by Poe that I haven't read yet that I will be getting to at some point in the next couple of months.
Yes, I revisited Annabelle Lee. That's what kicked off my poetry, reading a poem a day. And I just have it's a special memory for me, Annabelle Lee, just because that's really what started my journey with him. And, you know, I got to read a little bit in high school and, of course, in college. And, you know, I was trying to think when I actually read The Fall of the House of Usher. I don't remember reading in high school. It was college when I was introduced to it. And I don't know if I really 100% understood what was going on with it, but I did love the atmosphere of it. I loved, you know, just the vibes. And, you know, you and I were talking earlier before coming on, and I really just think I gravitate towards Gothic fiction in general and American Gothic fiction, just based on some of the stories that I have loved over the years that I have read. And that I always kind of refer to, you know, when I talk to people about, you know, horror stories that I love. But when did you first discover The Fall of the House of Usher?
I discovered The Fall of House of Usher in college also, and I liked it quite a bit then. But over the years, as I have read it and studied more about it and written about it, I have developed an even greater love for it. It is now my favorite short story by Poe, where for a long time my favorite was The Mask of the Red Death, which is still one of my favorites. But The Fall of the House of Usher has become very, you know, very near and dear to me.
I think for me, it wasn't my favorite until I read it a few more times. I think the retelling, What Moves the Dead, also showed me, yes, I have mine too, showed me the importance of it and how it can, you know, reappear or be reimagined by another author. And also the TV series by Mike Flanagan really opened up more. And I think this time around too, and just researching it more is just brought it to the forefront. If I had to give it a star rating, I would give it a 5 star.
Yes.
Just because there's so many things about it or elements about it that I love in a story. You know, the creepy house, you know, just the unreliable narrator. I don't know, just the different elements that you are sure to find in an Edgar Allan Poe story, because, you know, he writes about these themes or subjects quite often. And it's very creepy.
Yes, it is.
Very, very creepy. So before we dive into the fall of the House of Usher, let's see who is here with us. We've got a few people here, but we only have one person in our chat, and that is Jamie. Welcome, Jamie. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. I know several people were reading The Fall of the House of Usher because they were putting it in the Discord. In fact, Jen at Pages and Chaos actually got a graphic novel that looked really cool. And that is something I need to see if my library has, because, or maybe I should just buy it for my collection if it's available.
Buy it.
I'm trying not to buy as many books, but you know what? I think I'll splurge on some Poe.
Yes.
But yes, so welcome, Jamie. We appreciate you being here. Hello, Heidi. So happy you're here as well. And hello, Lauren from Happy Haunts Library. Lauren and I had the opportunity to open up Nevermore with some sprints on Sunday and really had a great time together, because Lauren, like you, Jen, really embraces the academic side of it, or just, you know, diving into more than just what's on the surface of the story. And I love that. I love that about both of y'all. And here is another wonderful friend of ours, Liz, and she's looking forward to hearing everyone's thoughts. She also is another academic. Now, if we could get Liz, I know she has a podcast, but if we could get Liz to somehow come on and talk to us, that would be like the trifecta for me of remarkable women who are just amazing when it comes to Edgar Allan Poe and other scholarly, you know, works out there.
It would be a perfect panel.
Yes, it would be a perfect panel. But I love it. Keep those puns coming.
Right.
But yes, anyone who wants to, you know, hear a different perspective besides just what's on the surface, we got the trifecta for you right here. And then here, even Lauren, Liz, love the latest podcast. Yes, wonderful. So I thought that we would just kind of open up and just talk a little bit about how the story got started. It was first published in 1839 in Burton's Gentleman's Magazine, and then it was included in a collection called Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque. I've never heard of that word, but anyway, I've heard of grotesque, but not arabesque. So it is what is considered American Gothic fiction, very atmospheric. It encompasses fear of unknown and psychological horror. And of course, it has an eerie house in it, which I just absolutely love. I love abandoned houses, abandoned places in general, you know, just anything that has desolation or decay. I don't know why. I wouldn't want to live in a house like that, but I just think it brings a extra level of spookiness to it. I think because it could actually maybe wear your mind down. Like, so that's a fear. That would be a fear of mine, is that, you know, being in an environment like that would actually break me down as a human. What do you think?
That's true. And the one you were talking as we were chatting before the show about being very drawn, I think you mentioned it here on the live show too, to American Gothic and finding yourself drawn to Gothic. And what you just said about that decay being something that really, you know, compels you to enjoy a story. That is like something very common in Gothic, is this idea of opulence and decadence, where you have this castle that at one point was beautiful, luxurious, but then decadence, if you know, you think about the wealthy who may overdo what they have, and just spend exorbitant amounts of money on luxury, and then those things begin to decay. So you've got that idea of, them putting forth all of their effort to build wealth and luxury for themselves at the expense of others quite often, and what happens when that starts to decay.
Yes.
And that's, and the American Gothic too is very, very much like an offshoot of Romanticism from the British Romantic era, which then you had off of that like dark Romanticism, which began to focus more on those darker aspects of humanity, like fallibility, melancholia, self-destruction,
Yes.
punishment, and the psychology of guilt. And then the Gothic really came then from the Romantic movement and that darker side. And I just want to share a real quick quote. This is from Alfred Ben Dixon, and this is in his essay, Romanticism and the American Gothic. He wrote, "The formation of a distinctly American tradition of fiction making during the first half of the 19th century ultimately rested on the adaptation of literary romanticism to the specific qualities of the American experience and the creation of the short story." So that's when Poe, and even before him, like Washington Irving, were taking the traditions from other countries who had more long established traditions and trying to bring that into the newly discovered America and putting their, kind of the social and historical context into that frame.
Yeah, because Gothic fiction was originally written, well, a great body of it during Victorian times. So it's wonderful, that you have, the era of Edgar Allan Poe and, masters, like you said, Washington Irving and Nathaniel Hawthorne, coming in here. But then even more contemporary writers like Shirley Jackson and even Toni Morrison, if you think about her novel, Beloved, so, and even, there are authors, that you might not even consider being American Gothic writers. I don't know per se that they would be in that category specifically, but have written pieces that are considered that. I mean, Anne Rice with The Interview of the Vampire, even Stephen King with The Shining could be argued that that would be considered an American Gothic tale.
And
perhaps.
there's even a Gothic reading of Dolores Claiborne too.
Yes, and also even H.P. Lovecraft. I mean, I read a story by him called The Outsider for Zombie-thon and loved it because of the Gothic vibes. And I was always thinking of him more as cosmic horror, and so when I read The Outsider, I was pleasantly surprised by that because I haven't read a large body of his work. I mean, I have, a lot of his stuff, but so that really kind of made me realize, I'm gravitating towards that. And like you mentioned, there's aspects of it, elements that I find interesting. You've got the rationality versus the irrational. Is it really happening, or is it all a dream? Is it made up in this mind that has been influenced by either mental illness or alcoholism or, drug use? Also the beliefs of Puritanism, factor into it. And you see that with Nathaniel Hawthorne for sure. And then you've got the guilt, you got the guilt factor. And then what they consider the uncanny, the mysterious, or the supernatural. And then you have what is called abhumans. I never knew that was a term. It doesn't mean that you're inhuman. It means that somehow you are like transitioning into something different, kind of like a vampire or a werewolf. So that was new to me, and I want to explore that a little more. And then, of course, you've got ghosts and monsters, which, I mean, just attracts me to any kind of story like that. But of course, this story also explores madness, or what you might consider mental illness. You've got reality versus imagination, and also the family situation, and then isolation. Isolation is a big factor that can add to the mental issues that people have. So let's see if anybody else is weighing in on this or coming in as we're chatting here. And yes, Lauren likes the pose. Keep them coming. And speak of the devil, Jen from Pages and Chaos. We were just talking about you and your graphic novel. And Heidi says, I tried to make every cat chat, even if I'm not at all in on the theme. Well, thank you, Heidi. We appreciate the support. I did find a new middle grade fantasy series that is all British folklore called The Dark is Rising. Yes,
Ooh.
that's awesome. And so it is double dipping for Folklore February and Fantasy February. Liz says, I look so forward to these conversations. You all do a great job of digging through the subtext, but keeping it so fun. Thank you, Liz. We appreciate that. And all thanks to Lauren. Can't stop thinking about it. To Liz and library. Well, she's saying the movie, not the podcast.
I'll think about both.
Yes, really. Also, did you know, I'm sure you know this, what influenced the fall of the House of Usher? Do you know?
You know what? I don't know that. So yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I can bring a fun fact to this to this
Yay.
conversation. You know, they say, I mean, I don't know how much of this is true, but there's an influence because Edgar Allan Poe is basing this kind of on two people that he knew that were friends of his mother, Eliza Poe. Now, you know, she was an actress, and these two people were actors. It was James Campbell Usher and Agnes Pyre Usher. Apparently, they were orphaned in 1814, and they both suffered from like mental anxiety. You know, they just had all kinds of stress and anxiety, and there's not a whole lot that was known about them, but all of Roderick's fears that we see in our short story kind of mimic this guy's, you know, James Campbell Usher. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So also too, there was another story that came out about the time, I should have written the title down, that came out that was similar to what Madeline was kind of suffering with. I should have written it down, but I forgot. But anyway, I thought that was interesting too, because it came out about the time that he was writing the story. So those are some influences. Do you have anything else that you know about the background of the story?
No. Now I'm gonna have to go research these other people that you talked about because I'm always excited to learn something new.
Yeah, I just had no idea. I mean, I was like going down this little rabbit hole. My issue is I'll go down the rabbit hole of research, and then it goes and branches off into all these different directions. So, I mean, I could have probably spent days just going in all the different directions, but I had to rein myself in. Otherwise, we'd be here for like 3 hours. I know. So, yes, the Ushers really existed according to this information. So I found that fascinating also too, that for two people to be so much, and I guess maybe that's part of it, the stress and the anxiety, they became actors. I guess they had to release it some way. But I don't know. I found that fascinating. This reread made me really think about the ways in which the American Gothic and the American West mythos overlap in some interesting ways. Yes, that sounds fascinating. So, Jen, give us a little synopsis of The Fall of the House of Usher. What is it about?
So it opens with a narrator, which Poe loves to do, is framing something, you know, a story within a story, which is also part of the Gothic tradition. So the narrator comes upon the House of Usher after he has been invited by his childhood friend Roderick, because Roderick's sister Madeline is not feeling well, and Roderick could use a friend. And so we open with the narrator's viewing of the house that immediately makes him feel very unsettled and very depressed. And then he comes in the house and sees Roderick and realizes that his childhood friend is not looking very well and seems to be a bit scattered in the mind. And then we also have Roderick's sister. Spoiler, should we say spoilers here?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Spoilers.
Spoilers. We do find out that Madeline is not just Roderick's twin. She's, or not just his sister, but also his twin. And they are connected in a hell of a lot of ways. And also connected to the house that's decaying, as are they. and the narrator is trying to soothe Roderick. And throughout the course, we find Roderick descending further and further into madness. Madeline does die. Roderick decides to bury her, not quite fully in the family burial ground, but keep her in the house for just a little while for reasons. And we find out that she indeed is not dead, and she comes back and falls upon Roderick, and the whole house falls. So we get a real fun deconstruction of the word fall, because the fall of the House of Usher, the family line falls, the house itself falls, and then this may be a reach, but you notice at the beginning it talks about it being in the autumn time.
Oh, yes.
Kind of fall. And Poe really loves to use time, whether it's seasons or like midnight, stuff like that, to indicate the themes of stories. So fall or autumn, we know typically represents that season where everything starts to die and starts to decay. So it's kind of a hint at the beginning that something is, something is decaying and something is eventually going to die before the story's over, which is also just a pretty good idea, going into Poe, that somebody is probably going to die before the story's over. So.
100%. I love how I didn't even think about her falling on Roderick as being a fall and the autumn.
Yeah.
Just like, that's amazing. I totally missed both of those. But yes, the house collapsing is the fall of the lineage, which I just, thought was amazing. And you have some foreshadowing of that when our narrator, comes up on horseback and he sees, the decay of the house, but he sees the small fissure from the top of the house all the way down to the base. But, it's not until the end, the dramatic at the end, which I absolutely love, when he's riding off, because he's just like, oh my gosh, this is horrible and terrible. And he's riding off, and it cracks enough that he can see the moon through the house at that point. So,
and one of the things too about Poe is that you can read this too. He has an essay on how he writes, called The Philosophy of Composition. But he talks about how that before a writer sets out to write a story, that writer needs to have the ending of the story in mind, so that everything in the story is going to point to that eventual ending. Sometimes it's also called the unity of effect, that everything that happens in the story is going to end up with this final effect. And you can trace that really well in the fall of the House of Usher, because the beginning is talking about the fall, the decaying house, and that unsettled feeling the narrator gets. And then we see at the end, he was, all of those feelings were valid, that he had, because it was going to ultimately end very badly for the
Yes. Yeah, I love it. I love that it kind of goes in a circle too. It's like, a cyclical, is that the right word? Cyclical, from the beginning and to the end. I mean, because he's not there very long. But what do you want to talk about first? Do you want to talk about the characters? Do you want to talk about the parallels? I found that all fascinating. The parallels.
Whichever one you want to do. Maybe the characters first to kind of get a background of them, you think?
Yeah.
And then the parallels.
Okay, sure. Yes. So, first of all, our narrator. What do we know about our narrator?
We really don't know much, which Poe loves to do, right? Just that he's coming upon he's been invited back to try to help his childhood friend.
Yes. And, considering that he is unreliable means that he's not a very trustworthy storyteller, is he? So we don't really know 100%, is this even really happening? Which I have a question about that later on. Is that really even happening? Can we as the reader believe this narrator? I mean, ultimately in the beginning, I feel like I can, because he's so good at describing what he's seeing. You know, he's setting up, it's from his point of view. It's, you know, he's setting up the scene, the setting for us, you know, in great description. I think we know that he's a childhood friend, although he has not seen Roderick in many, many years. But they must have been friendly enough that he would be willing to put his life kind of on hold so that he could go to Roderick, which we also kind of, I think, find out that Roderick really doesn't have a whole lot of friends either, if this is the only person that he has reached out to, right? And I think in the very beginning, you know, he is a voice of reason and kind of seems to be taking it all in. We get to learn a little bit about Roderick and Madeline, you know, even though Madeline really doesn't even get mentioned quite at the very beginning. We know she's there, but we don't really see her at the very beginning. But I think as the story progresses, you almost kind of question, and is it because he is in this isolated situation with Roderick, who's going mad, that he's also like his mind is starting to play tricks on him?
In this story, it's one of those rare occasions where I tend to believe this narrator, you know, which is not the case with, of course, like the Black Cat or the Telltale Heart, where the narrators obviously got some issues. But I do tend to believe his version of this story.
Yeah, I mean, there's parts of me, and it's only because there is one particular line that he mentions that kind of just made me, and I didn't really think about it at the beginning, but the more that I thought about what was happening at the end, is that he does make the comment as he's you know, coming up to the house, about how he feels about the house and the feeling that he's having. And the quote is, "To the after dream of the reveler upon opium." So it makes me wonder, you know, is this person a person that partakes of that kind of stuff? Or is he just bringing that up because in the past perhaps he has, and so he can compare it to that because maybe the situation seems a little unreal? I don't know. And then he says, "There are combinations of very simple natural objects which have the power of thus affecting us. Still, the analysis of this power lies among considerations beyond our depth." So then it kind of changes that perhaps it's just because of the setting and that it makes him feel this way. And I think your mind can play tricks on you if you are having some kind of fear or you are unsettled about something that's happening, especially if you haven't had experience with it.
Right.
You know, so I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence about it. It's like I mean, he is considered an unreliable narrator, but I don't know. I kind of feel like you do in some ways. He doesn't give us any kind of other evidence. They're not drinking together, he and Roderick. He's not saying that he has to go get some kind of special powder to take to go to sleep. Right. I mean, it's none of that is happening, you know, in there. So it leads me to believe, but at the same time, it's like, you know, could it have been something make-believe? Was he really there?
With Poe, we just never know, do we? Because he likes to kind of leave it a lot to the reader to interpret, right?
Yeah. I mean, I almost kind of wish that line wasn't in there because then it puts a little doubt in your mind. Shame on you, Poe, for doing that. We have Catherine from Bay Books here joining us. Welcome, welcome. And also Swank. Hello, hello. And Jamie was referring to your visual, your great visual, you know, at the beginning with all of the connections with fall. Yeah, so I don't know. I like this narrator. I actually prefer him over our narrators in The Black Cat and The Telltale Heart. I'm kind of glad that we read those two stories last year because it kind of really did kind of lay a foundation for us for this story.
Yeah. This narrator is a lot less murderous.
Yes. Yeah, and actually, I don't think he's like really even thrilled about being a party to Roderick's decision
No,
to put Madeline in the chamber. You
right.
know,
He kind of goes along with it. There's lots of like this commentary because everybody pretty much is probably aware of the grave robbing that happened, when you had cadavers being dissected for medical reasons, and eventually, you had people going and just without permission getting people out of their graves and taking them. So there's kind of the idea that Roderick could be wanting to keep Madeline a little bit closer because he's afraid that somebody's going to use her body for science, especially because she has this mysterious illness. So I think that's part of the reason why the narrator's like, okay, I kind of get why he might want to do this, keep her close for, a few weeks. So yeah, I really do. I love this narrator.
Well, also, I mean, it's because the doctors couldn't really diagnose Madeline. We don't really know. I mean, I guess in a way we kind of know it's something to do, obviously, with the relationship in the Usher family because of the lineage.
Yes.
So she's probably suffering. I think both of them are suffering because of, the reasons that have to be about the family.
The branch that doesn't extend.
Yes, the branch doesn't extend. But yeah, I think that for him, he has to make choices, and also to think that because of Roderick's mental state, I don't think he wants to do anything that's going to upset Roderick even more, because Roderick is already anxious for a couple of reasons, which I'll share why I think, but then also the death of his sister, and then, well, the supposable death of his sister, and then, being afraid of that actual death and what it means for the family. And so I just think he's trying to be a friend and accommodate him. And I do think probably he thinks that it won't be for a long period of time, because I do think he mentions before she's interred or whatever.
Yeah.
So what about Roderick? What do you have to say about Roderick?
So Roderick, like, there's a few ways of looking at Roderick, especially in terms of his relationship with Madeline. There's that duality where we could look at Roderick as being more so the mind and the intellect, because we do know, as a child, he was very creative. He was very artistic. We get his poem that I know we want to talk about in a little while too, The Haunted Palace. And then you could think of Madeline as more of that emotional counterpart to him. There's also a way of looking at his relationship with Madeline. Got to pull some Freud in here. So sorry. So sorry. But Madeline is that part of himself that he wants to repress, which is why he wants to bury that part of him. Because she is exhibiting the madness that he's feeling, possibly guilt, but I'm gonna let you put that point out because I know you mentioned in the chat something, but he could be trying to repress his own guilt for a few things by, going ahead and burying Madeline, even though she's not quite dead. So to me, Roderick is, I don't really want to go hard on Roderick. That is on issues, but in some ways, I'm like, he's kind of the bad guy here.
Yeah, I mean, and actually, this is his life is a tragedy. If you think about it, this is the tragedy. The Fall of the House of Usher is really the tragedy of Roderick Usher. If you think about it, he is the last male heir of the Usher family, and he's failed in continuing it, if you think about it. But I think he also blames Madeline for that, and so that's part of it. And as we said, they are twins, and neither one of them have children. And that is only because we suspect that there is an incestual relationship here. But, I bring something up about this that I kind of thought about only because I blame Mike Flanagan with the Fall of the House of Usher series, just because of how Madeline is portrayed in that series. But I just think that I agree with everything that you're saying about him. He just, he's suffering from a lot of he is like he has the mental illness, which is the opposite of what Madeline is going through. But eventually it's going to break him down physically as well, because ultimately he dies from fright.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and she at her hands, basically.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Let's talk about Madeline, and then we'll go into that territory about their relationship, because I just find that fascinating to myself. Lauren is loving our convo so far, and we appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
So what about Madeline? What do you want to say about Madeline?
I have a lot of sympathy for Madeline, because she is really, that part, like I said, of Roderick that he wants to repress and he wants to put away. He's, so concerned for her, he says, but she's staying isolated. She makes that rare appearance. And we don't really get a lot from her until the very end. And then he's terrified of her. But you have to ask why. What did he do to her that he knows when she comes back, he's in some deep, what? Because, and it's also interesting when we think about connecting it to the telltale heart. I'm trying to look this quote here. Whenever Roderick realizes that Madeline has come up and she's at the door, he says, let me look at, "Oh, whither shall I fly? Will she and not be here anon? Is she not hurrying to upbraid me for my haste? Have I not heard the footsteps on the stair? Do I not distinguish that heavy and horrible beating of her heart?" So to me, that's like connecting to the telltale heart, that guilt. He knows he did something wrong. So I like Madeline as a feminist reading. I think Madeline's badass, coming back to be like, you thought you did this, but you didn't do this. I'm going to show you. That's my take on Madeline.
Yes, well, and I mean, that's what I kind of noticed about it. I didn't think of Madeline because, like you said, she is not even mentioned. The narrator doesn't even see her right away when he enters the house. And except for that one moment where she's kind of gliding around the house and she's not paying attention to him, she's almost ghost-like at that point. Yeah. So it's almost like she is not worthy to be even introduced to Roderick's childhood friend. You would think that this is the first time he's meeting her. He knows about her, and also too, he didn't even realize that they were twins.
Right.
So my thing with the relationship between them is, I asked that question: is their relationship incestuous? And is that the reason why the family is cursed? That is the secrets of the House of Usher, because people in the community don't even really know the Ushers. They think of the Ushers, the family, as the house. They don't even think of them as individual people because they're so private. And it's because of what's going on in this house. Part of me thinks that the reason that this is the end of the lineage and it's causing Roderick so much stress is that maybe Roderick, knows that the only way that we're going to be able to continue this lineage is if we have children together. And so part of me wonders, did Madeline refuse? She's submissive to him. She's not given the same rights. She's not on equal footing. He's in charge of everything, but she's also in charge of herself. And unless Roderick actually forces her, what if she just decides, I don't want to be a party of this? That would be a feminist action, correct?
Yes.
And you brought up a point before we even started our chat that perhaps maybe she could not physically. And so then perhaps that is causing him mental anguish. So the mental anguish could be a combination that Madeline has not complied with him, or Madeline can't, that they are cursed and can't continue on, and it's going to end here. And that's a lot of weight for him to bear.
As the
And
patriarch.
as the patriarch, yes. And also the fact that really, will it even matter? Nobody's even going to know that they're not there until somebody
Right.
comes upon them at some point, because they're isolated, right? They're in
so
an isolated area.
Mhm.
And it's going to be like, oh yeah, that house, the fall of the house, not necessarily of the ushers who live in the house. So this brings me to the comparison of Madeline in the short story to Madeline in the TV show by Mike Flanagan, which I think Mike Flanagan does a good job of portraying his women in a more feminist light
Yes.
than in the stories of old, you know. And I find in the short story, Madeline is submissive until the very end.
Right.
And at the end, the fact that she is able to get out of a sealed coffin, able to get out of a chamber that has this heavy iron door, you know, stopping it, and can walk all the way to where Roderick is to basically tell him, you know, I'm taking you with me, dude.
Yes.
Basically, you coming to hell with me.
Exactly.
And the fact that you know that she has been through so much struggle because she's bloodied. It's not like she just walked in there like this, you know, beautiful spirit or whatever. I mean, she's described as pretty, you know, in her coffin with her rosy cheeks and the blood or whatever. But she gets her moment at that point. It was sort of like, you know, you thought that you could be in charge of me, but I'm going to take you down at the very end.
Yes.
Whereas in the TV show, it's the opposite to me.
Yeah.
Madeline is in control. She controls Roderick. Everything that they do, everything's about this family, what they have to do until the end. When Roderick turns on her. Now, of course, we know that she comes back too.
Right.
But it's sort of like that was his moment to make her submissive. You know, and I found that fascinating, you know, but ultimately Roderick doesn't win because she comes back to get him.
Yes.
It's sort of like, you're going to go to hell with me as well.
Exactly. And the house and everything like collapses. Yeah.
So what do you think about my theory here? Do you think
I am like, my brain is like ping, 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 ping. I love your theory. I am obsessed with your theory. I love it.
Well, I just wish we would know. That's the one thing that I wish we knew more about it. And I guess that's what makes it so fun reading, you know, and analyzing the work is that if you have enough to support it, you could go down that road, maybe.
This makes me think we really need a retelling from Madeline's perspective.
Yes.
Somebody needs to write that.
Yes. Yes. I wish I was a stronger writer.
I write more like academic style,
Yeah.
but I don't know about creative, but now I'm thinking, you know what? I could do this. We could do this. Kat,
yeah, you think we could do this?
You and me, Kat.
We have a project. You heard it here. This will be the beginnings of it, because like you, I tend to write more nonfiction, you know, stuff. So yeah, anyway, that's what I think. I mean, I do think that there is an incestuous relationship. Clearly, that's what the family, the foundation of the family, which is icky, which is icky. Icky to us because I mean, I guess was it icky back then too? I don't know enough about it.
I mean, brother and sister would be, but I mean, we can't ignore the fact that we're discussing Edgar Allan Poe, who did marry his cousin.
Yes, he did.
He was 7 and she was 13. Of course, there are speculations that wasn't necessarily a romantic type of marriage. Because they did live with, you know, her mother, his aunt. So part of it could have been financial for Poe, because we do know he struggled with money. But the fact remains, I mean, I'm not sitting here. I love Poe, but I'm not going to try to sugarcoat the fact that, you know, he was 27, she was 13. So we do know like cousins got married in the past, but brothers and sisters, that would still be frowned upon. But yeah, the idea of incest is very prominent in a lot of Gothic literature. So, yeah.
Well, I had just finished reading this, and this is something that Lauren was kind of interested in, was the
Mhm.
relationship between Poe and Virginia, which
Mhm.
was his cousin. And I've gotten to the point where, you know, Poe was devastated because Virginia's mother, at some point, there was another relative,
Yeah.
Nielsen, perhaps, Poe. I don't know if that is the pronunciation of his name, but when he discovered that there was a possibility that Virginia would marry him, that's when Poe interceded and was like, oh no,
Mhm.
y'all need to come here. And they were married. But there's no indication in here. They don't say anything about it being a romantic
Right.
relationship. It's just that Poe cared so deeply, and it was a close relationship between
Mhm.
them just because of the time that they spent together. But I haven't gotten to anything about that yet in the biography. So I'm curious to see if it was just, you know, a relationship just because he cared so deeply for her and for her mother, you know, that he wanted to, and I don't know if it was also to replace his mom. You know, he had a very terrible life when it came to women that he cared about and loved,
Oh yeah.
you know, leaving him, the abandonment of
And,
it.
you know, to put it just kind of bluntly, Poe had some mommy issues. He had some daddy
Yeah.
issues. He had a lot of issues. But I
Yes,
love him. I've
yes,
got
I
a
do too.
shrine over here. Promise I love my Poe.
Yeah, he's so flawed in many ways, but what he created from from his flawed
Yes.
life is remarkable. Hello, Sophie.
Hey,
Welcome for
Sophie.
being here. And I missed so much of the chat, but can't wait to catch up afterwards. Well, we appreciate you being
Yeah.
here. And Jamie says it's so hard for me to separate Poe's Madeline from Flanagan's now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. But you know what I think is fascinating about it is that it had been a couple of years that I had read the short story. I had read it actually before reading What Moves the Dead. And so it's been a couple of years. And then watching Flanagan's series last year, just I was like, wow, you know, I love her strength. I love how much she wants to keep this family together and what she will do, the lengths that she will go through to do this. Whereas the Madeline in the story wants to kind of end that, like, we need to stop it here, kind of thing. Enough is enough. And I'm suffering physically, and I'm suffering physically because of that. And who knows, she might be suffering physically also because of any relations that she and Roderick had. I
Right.
mean, I hate to be graphic about that, but I mean, sometimes, oh, you know, a woman can be injured,
Yes.
especially if Roderick had had enough with her
And
saying, no, I'm not going to do that, you
tried to
know,
force. Yeah.
and forced her, you know,
And
which
that
is
could be a
just,
lot of his guilt too, and his reason for, you know, wanting to go ahead and bury her, even though she wasn't dead yet. So again, with that repression of his guilt, and she's a reflection of him, like looking, you know, they're twins, but also a reflection of all of the, you know, guilt that he's feeling, that he wants to put it away.
there's a part of me that also wonders if he also wanted to put Madeline away so that there was not an opportunity for her to say anything to the narrator.
Yes. Yeah.
Because if he found out that that was the case, I think he, you know, was probably intrigued and maybe a little confused that there was no outside, you know, branches.
Right.
You know, he doesn't know all the details. I
Right.
mean, I think you could get away with having a cousin, you know, that was many, many generations removed from you or whatever to keep that going. But, and like you said, it was not an unusual um, thing to happen. So I'm almost wondering if that was his haste. Like,
Right.
you know, Roderick says he, you know, put her in there because she was dead, but I think it's hinted at that she wasn't, not by the way her appearance was,
Yeah.
which is kind
culture
of
place.
is unusual to me, and maybe because the narrator has no experience with it, with, you know, when someone recently dies or the case, you know, it's not like he held a mirror up to see if she was breathing. I
Right.
mean, I
Yeah.
myself, if I was in that position, which I hope I would never be in that position, I think I would be doing all kinds of stuff. Are you really sure? Are you
Right.
really sure?
Right.
100%. Because she looks like she's sleeping. She looks like Sleeping
And
Beauty
of
to
course, we
me.
do know there were premature burials at that time. Poe wrote about it, but we also know, I mean, they had bells on the,
The graves,
so
yes.
you could ring the bell, be like, wait, I'm not dead.
You
So,
know, do you know when I found out about that, I actually read a Mary Higgins Clark novel, and that is how the killer buried a woman, and they had the bell.
mhm.
And ever since I found out, I thought that was just a fictional thing. And I, you know, researched it because that's what I
Mhm.
do. And I found
Yeah,
out that it was true. And I'm
yeah,
like, I told my husband, I'm like, that is one reason I don't want to be buried. One
right,
reason, because what if somebody makes a mistake? I've seen too many things where people
right.
I've read too many stories, watched too many movies where the person is like Richard Thomas in The Autopsy, where he's bit by a snake that paralyzes him and
Uh-huh.
he's really alive, but he can't do anything about it. So
Yeah.
I've told my husband, I'm like, there are several reasons why I don't want to be buried. This is
Uh-huh.
one of them.
Yes.
And secondly, you need to make sure. You need to make
Exactly.
sure
Right. Please make
that
yes.
it is true.
Yes. I'm
I,
highly,
Angelica,
highly claustrophobic. So that is like, I cannot even handle it.
Lauren says, I need to reread the story from a more feminist lens. Love that interpretation. Yeah, I really want to do more research on it and see
Mhm.
what is out there as far as, you know, and even maybe see if there's anything about Flanagan's, like production wise, why he
Mhm.
chose to, you know, create the characters the way he did in there. Hello, Emma. Hey, hey, welcome. Hello, Stina. You are here. We're still discussing,
Yeah.
so you might have missed a little bit in the beginning, but welcome for the remainder of our chat. And Jamie says they definitely have an unhealthy
Yeah.
relationship no matter how you look at it. Yes, yes, because obviously, you know, Roderick decides everything that Madeline's going to do,
Yeah.
for sure.
Mhm.
And Jen says cousin marriages are popular to keep the family lines pure, especially in the royal
Yep.
families in Europe. Oh,
Mhm.
I did not realize that.
You
Ah,
know, they had to make sure to keep it pure, right? Keep it,
keep it
all
pure.
right, right. In their terminology, which I won't say a lot now, but I just want to say just really quickly, Kat, since you love the Gothic, there is not that the Gothic ever went away, but there is a huge resurgence in Gothic literature right now, especially
Oh,
in terms of the past coming back to haunt the present. Reasons, November onward, here now, January, reasons that we won't get into on a live show, but
oh, yes.
obviously the past is coming back,
Hmm.
haunting us now, and we are seeing a lot of Gothic from previously marginalized voices like women, people of color, people in the LGBTQ community, taking the themes of the Gothic, but bringing them into current situations that we find ourselves in. So
Uh-huh.
really look for a big explosion of the Gothic.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm writing all of this down too, and also the philosophy of composition and unity of
Yeah,
effect,
yeah.
because I did not know about that as well. So yeah, that's those are our characters, you know, our human characters. I mean, there's mention of a doctor, there's mention of servants, whatever, but we also have another character. Who's our other character? Or what's our other character?
The house, yay!
Yes, and the house is amazing to me because
Yay!
it reflects you know, the decay is not just of the house itself, it's the decay of the siblings, it's the decay of the lineage. It's tied to that Usher family, you know, and I love at the end that the house dies, you know, the Usher name dies when the house collapses.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a wonderful image to me. You know what I'm saying? It's that whole scene at the end is so dramatic to me, but it's in a wonderful way, not in a, you know, cartoonish kind of way, but
Yes.
I could close my eyes and literally see him riding off on the horse, turning back, seeing the crack, the
Yes.
moon shining through, and the house collapsing. I just absolutely just adore
I
the
know.
final
I do
scene.
too. I do too. It is absolutely stunning. And I was just thinking now, this is probably an overactive, you know, burnout grad school thought, but just thinking about that feminist reading that we have and that visual at the end of the moon being completely visible through the crack, because the moon is, you know, feminine in
Yes.
literature and, you know, folklore and mythology. So that idea of the feminist, you know, the moon has taken over, Madeline has ended everything on her terms. So now that moon that was a little visible is now completely visible. That just hit me right now as we were talking.
I
After
love that.
you
I
talk about
love that.
the feminist take on it.
Yeah. I
Um,
love that.
yeah, it just hit me.
And I love that it's a man that's running away.
Exactly. He's like, uh-oh, we're coming after the patriarchy. That's empowering when you think about it like that. Now I'm gonna be fired up.
Yeah. Yeah. And Swank says in the TV series, Madeline didn't have kids either. She
Right.
didn't. I think part
Good
of it
point.
is because that I think she did not want to submit. She didn't want to be submissive to that portrayal of how a woman should be. Because if you remember in the TV series, she basically I don't know if she insults Annabelle, but there is a scene between them, you know, like because Annabelle is a mother, they're raising the children. She kind of feels like Annabelle is what has kept Roderick back and has made him weak. And that's why I think she takes on that role, is that their empire is only going to survive if she is at the head of it. She's making those decisions.
And
And if you think
also,
about it, Roderick's children are pretty much the downfall of this family.
and they're all gonna die because of, you know, I know we did spoilers here, but that's the deal, you know, that they would be wealthy, but they would have to agree that, you know, every one of their kids was going to die. So she was like, no, I'm just not gonna have kids then.
Right.
Which really lends to your reading of Madeline in, you know, Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher, her decision not to have kids and continue this type of, you know, curse. Even though
Mm-hmm.
Flanagan took a different spin on it, it's still very similar in thematic content.
Yes. Yes, I agree. And Liz loves the reading of the moon. Yeah,
We are
I do
nerding
too.
out. I'm having so much fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and I think just exploring that a little bit more. She's not, you know, you think of this as being, you know, it is Roderick's downfall,
Mm-hmm.
you know, basically. But it's also an opportunity to look more closely at Madeline, I
Yeah.
think. You know, now talking about parallels, I just thought this was amazing how many different parallels there are in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them that I loved was at the very beginning when you get the reflection of the house in the pool. I just, you know, you see in doubles. And then, of course,
Mm-hmm.
Madeline and Roderick are twins. And so you've got the doubles there. Both of them are dealing with illness. Madeline's is more physical, whereas Roderick's is more mental. So I think that is interesting to have both of those represented, that it's manifested differently in both of them. And also the fact that we don't know what physically is ailing Madeline.
Right.
So to me, I think there's, it just leads me to believe that Roderick is responsible in some way. I think also too, you have the house mimicking the story that is read when Madeline is rising from the grave, and that was called the Mad Tryst. Is that right? Or Tryst?
Yes, Tryst.
How would you put it? Tryst?
Tryst.
Which I loved. I love that that story as well in there. And then also too, the reflection when the house falls, it's actually, because the twins fall.
Yes.
Usher house and then the Usher twins.
Yes. And there's the doubling with the Haunted Palace, that song or poem that Roderick recites. Because the Haunted Palace can be seen as the downfall of a palace or house itself, but also of the mind. Think back especially to the beginning where when the narrator comes upon the House of Usher, he talks about the windows looking like vacant eyes. Well, then we have in the poem, The Haunted Palace, it starts off with eyes. It starts off talking about windows where you could see all these fantastical, wonderful scenes. But when we get to the end of that poem, The Haunted Palace, it talks about how all the, scenes now are discordant, and you see that downfall. I don't have the poem like right up here with me right now, but I could probably
let's see. So what stanza do you think? Or do you want me to just go through it?
Yeah, read, you know what? Let me see. I may be able to pull it up. Well, if you have it right there, you go ahead.
So like in the beginning, it says, in the greenness of our valleys by good angels tenanted, once a fair and stately palace, radiant palace reared its head. In the monarch thought's dominion, it stood there. Never seraph spread opinion over fabric fair so fair. Banners yellow, glorious golden, on its roof did float and flow. All this was in the olden time long ago. And every gentle air that dallied in that sweet day along the ramparts, plumed and pallid, a winged odor went away. Wanderers in that happy valley through two luminous windows saw spirits moving musically to a lute's well-tuned law, round about a throne where sitting, I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, Porphyrogene. That's Porphyrogene.
It's purple and has to do with like royal lineage, like genetic, like it means royalty, the color purple. So they, again, lending to the story where you had this royal or wealthy family and they were passing that down genetically.
So in state his glory well befitting, the ruler of the realm was seen. And all with pearl and ruby glowing was the fair palace door, through which came flowing, and sparkling evermore, a troop of echoes whose sweet duty was but to sing in voices of surpassing beauty the wit and wisdom of their king. Shall I go on? But evil things in robes of sorrow assailed the monarch's high estate. Ah, let us mourn, for never morrow shall dawn upon him desolate. And round about his home the glory that blushed and bloomed is but a dim remembered story of the old time entombed. And travelers now within the valley through the red litten windows see vast forms that move fantastically to a discordant melody. While like a rapid, ghastly river through the pale door, a hideous throng rush out forever and laugh but smile no more.
See, I love to hear Kat read, so that's one of the reasons I was like, go ahead and read that whole poem. But if you look at it in terms of Roderick's mind, right, and you think about it at the beginning, it talks about the luminous windows. So his eyes, where we know from what we learn in the story that he was very artistic and very creative as a child. So he would have been, spouting forth all these wonderful, beautiful thoughts. But when we get to the end, the luminous eyes are now red litten windows, red and weary, and he's spouting off discordant sounds. And of course, at the end, this is just like trying to rein it all in real quick in a little synopsis. But it talks about how now the thoughts coming out, or the words coming out of his mouth, are nonsensical madness, laughing but not smiling, so that kind of maniacal laughter. So that poem is a parallel for Roderick's decaying mind too.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, he I don't know, the more we discuss him, the more I dislike him. I think I kind of felt sorry for Roderick at the very beginning, his anxiety, but the more that I, really researched and thought about it, I'm like, he was all for himself. I don't really think, he cared much for Madeline. I mean, I think there was probably some unconditional love there, perhaps. I also do think that Madeline, even though at the end she comes basically to, to get him, to kill him, I think that there's a part of her that does have some love for him, a love that when they perhaps were younger, when they were more innocent, their situation was more innocent, and weren't having the issues between themselves, that because they do say she has a low, like moaning cry, which to me is not the same as like a scream, of like vengeance coming out, but like almost like a melancholy, to this, that you were someone that I trusted and loved at one time, that was supposed to take care of me. And then look at what you did to me. You ultimately tried to kill me and you didn't succeed. So now I'm here to take you down.
Because there's grief there to dissect too on Madeline's part, because we know that even if, and when people in your family hurt you, especially if it's, of course, this is a fictional story, but if we think about, but they may not physically try to kill us, but they may try to repress parts of us or push us away. And we know we have to remove ourselves from family members certain times, but it doesn't negate the grief that you will feel at the same time. So we could think about Poe dealing with that too, with his own parents, and even his tumultuous relationship with his foster father, that he never was actually loved by John Allan.
Yeah, and I mean, I think if you also, the fact that he put twins in the story, is it almost makes you wonder, Roderick represents the daddy issues, whereas like Madeline is the mommy issues, kind of thing. So it's the emotional, both of them represent something emotionally for Poe. He had a very sad upbringing to me. One thing I discovered, and I mentioned this on the Sprints with Lauren, is I had no idea that Poe had siblings. I guess because a lot of times, I'll be honest, I read more of his work than I've read about his life, except for like little biographies that will accompany a story, that you'll read. And mainly those biographical excerpts of his life are very general. They tell you when he was born, when he died, a little bit about, who he was, his parents were, his career, and then of course his demise and the mystery that surrounds that. So I just don't ever remember ever reading about his siblings, and the fact that he was not with his siblings, throughout time. I mean, his older brother lived with a relative, and his sister lived with another family, a Scottish family. And, and then Poe was adopted by, John Allan. But I just, it amazed me, that separation and how their lives would intersect at times. But there really truly wasn't any, what's the word? They weren't as connected as you would think, being siblings. where you see that connection with Roderick and Madeline until, this illness has happened, and then they're kind of like separated. And then you have the actual separation when he decides to entomb her.
Mm-hmm.
But I find his life fascinating in the sense of I can see why he wrote, the stories that he wrote and where it came from and why these themes or the subject matter repeats itself so much, because he was really haunted about a lot of what happened to his mother. And then a lot of people, and in fact, Poe himself died so young.
Yes.
You know?
And so alone too. And it makes me think, about how many stories and poems of his deal with isolation. And as you were talking about all of his, being alone, it made me think of, his poem about being alone, about all my life I've been alone. Everything I've loved alone. And that makes me, even in the fall of the House of Usher, there's that aloneness, that isolation that we, have. So, yeah, a lot to think about with Poe.
It is. And I mean, also, too, it's like that self-imposed isolation as opposed to being isolated, someone isolating you purposely, so it's fascinating to me because there are times where Poe was isolated, from his family out of his control. But then there was also times where he isolated himself because of the situation. But, he also, there was a part of him that could be jovial. Apparently it was when he was not drinking and, taking any kind of drugs, but
he has some lighter stories and poems too. He really does.
He does.
In my class, there's one we call it, the lighter side of Poe, where I'm like, he wasn't always, we mostly know him for his macabre stories, but he wasn't always writing that. He has other types of work.
Yes, he does. And I don't think they get acknowledged quite as much.
Right.
Because people are so attracted to the macabre. Right? And I personally love his detective stories. I absolutely love them. And I also like how you see some of that translate into, popular culture as well. I mean, I just watched The Raven, the movie adaptation of that, and really enjoyed seeing how his stories came to life, in a different way, through someone who's murdering, people using Poe stories. But I don't know, I was like not 100% thrilled with John Cusack's portrayal of him. But it's like, I guess, I mean, in some aspects he was fine. In others, I was just like, really? Was Poe this over the top? I mean, I'm reading some about that in the biography. And so it's like, yeah, I guess maybe he was kind of like that at times, which kind of makes me like, maybe it's just me. I just don't want to accept him being that way.
A little melodramatic.
Yes, for sure. And Swank was saying that their parents were probably related to keep the bloodline going. Yeah. Which is sad because of, as we know today, what can happen to children, as a result of that. And hello, Nicole. I booped the like button. We appreciate it. Thank you. So yeah, I don't know. Let's see. John Cusack did a great job playing John Cusack. Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, it was hard to convince my husband to watch The Raven. I was like, come on, Barry, you enjoyed the Poe Speakeasy and you like the Fall of the House of Usher TV series.
Amazing. If it comes
he loved it.
Go.
Yes, I would highly. I'm going to piggyback on Jen saying that. If the Poe Speakeasy comes to your town or close to your town, please try to go if you can, because it is a wonderful experience to see the stories come to life by an actor who is the storyteller. It's really atmospheric. And yes, they do serve cocktails,
And
but
the
you can
cocktails are,
also, oh,
I love.
yes, I loved everything that we were served. But I will say you can, if you don't want to drink an alcoholic beverage, they will make mocktails.
Yep.
And if you happen to be allergic to any of the ingredients, they will accommodate you as well. They want people to be there to partake in it. And I did find out from one of the actors, who was also the host for the show. He was saying that they're supposed to be having a part 2 in the future, and that they're going to have some other shows through their company or whatever. So I would be interested in going to see the other stories as well. But I did think they picked good stories, for an introduction to that. But they seem like they have all kinds of shows similar to this. There is a Dracula one that is happening in New Orleans in February. And then there's also something called Drunken Shakespeare that I heard about, that's up north. And New York, I think, was one of the cities. There's like 4 cities. Now, it's a little bit different in the sense that you can have alcoholic beverages, but what they do is the actors drink beverages, and then they have to act out the story.
Oh, I need to go to this. I'm in Alabama, but maybe they'll come somewhere.
So I'm wondering,
New York road trip.
Well, but it's so funny because since I went to that show, to the Post Speakeasy, all these other things are popping up now because I'm following it, but yeah. And Swank is saying true. Cusack playing Cusack. Yeah. So I was just I was just like, I don't know if this is really, I would just think, he would be a little more reserved at certain points. I don't know. I need to see that movie. I think it's called The Pale Blue Eye.
I've seen it.
How is the Poe, the person who portrays Poe in that? Is he more what you would think Poe would be like, or no?
I think he does a pretty good job. I think so.
Okay. Yeah. But anyway, The Raven was wonderful. I'm glad Jamie recommended it to me because the whole story itself was really good. Really, the premise of it. I don't know if you've ever seen it. But,
I have not seen that one.
Yeah, I would. There are some scenes I was like, "Whoo!" They didn't spare us on that being gruesome.
All right, I may need to check it out then.
Especially The Pit and the Pendulum. I'm just gonna say that one. I was like, I literally was like, "Ooh, ooh, ooh!" Every time that pendulum, I was like, they were not caring.
No, and I did love how Mike Flanagan put that in his series too. I liked the
Yeah, I think they did a great job. So anyway, I don't really have much more to say about the story. What about you, Jen?
I think we covered a lot, and even more than as we were talking, we discovered more stuff. So I think I am good for now.
Yeah, and if anyone in the chat has any final thoughts or want to share with us, what did you think of the story? If you had to give the story a rating, what would you give it? I mean, I mentioned before, it's a 5-star for me. I think I have a new appreciation for the story after rereading it, after seeing the Mike Flanagan TV show, after reading the reimagining of What Moves the Dead, which I'm supposed to be rereading that again and haven't started it yet. And also all the research that I did on it just really got me excited, more so of dissecting it some more. So if you want to put in the chat what you would rate it, if you give a rating, or if you have any final thoughts, let us know. Jen, would you say this is a 5-star read for you as well?
Absolutely. And I appreciate it. Believe it or not, I didn't think I could appreciate it more, but I do. And I am just so blown away by your interpretation of Madeline and looking at it more through her view and a feminist lens. So you have given me another newfound appreciation for the story. So thank you, Kat.
And maybe we have a little ember simmering that possibly we could be the ones
We could be the
that
ones.
tells her story.
We could be the ones. You know what? It
We could
feels
get
very
Liz. We could get Liz and
yeah.
Lauren involved in this.
Yeah, listen, let's collaborate, all of you, because this feels very, very timely and very important to tell a story from a feminist lens. So let's do this.
Yeah. So, is there anything that you would like to share that's coming up on your channel before we close out our, chat today? Or is there anything on the horizon?
I went away for a minute. I was like, all
No.
right. I am currently working on a polar gothic series. I have the first video up in the series already where I've read The Terror by Dan Simmons and talked about it in terms of polar gothic. And I am in the middle of filming my second vlog for that series where I'm reading Dark Matter by Michelle Paver and watching the Terror series on AMC based on Dan Simmons' novel. And I will be continuing in this series by rewatching The Thing and then also reading All the White Spaces by Allie Wilkes. So if you want to see how, polar gothic can be interpreted, then check that out.
That sounds fantastic. I have not seen your video yet. I was actually supposed to be reading The Terror in January because Alex at Frank Fiction and Nicole at Noteworthy Fiction was also reading it. And I just could not fit it in. It is such a chunker. It's going to be one of those books that I'm going to have to read next January and make it a priority. I'm very intrigued by it because Cliff at Cliff's Dark Gems, you, several other people, it has really great reviews, but yet Alex had some struggles. She's still reading it. Some struggles. She's still intrigued with it. She's having some struggles with it though. And Nicole did as well. And I can understand based on what they've shared with me, about it. So it kind of makes me like hesitant, but then Faye told me that I probably would enjoy it just because of the type of books that I've read. I like Victorian literature, and so I have to look at, I have all my friends, and you've got some friends on one side and some friends on the other. It's the same way with Shirley Jackson's We've Always Lived in the Castle. When I went into that, there were some people who were on one side of the fence that love it, and there are others on the other side that don't. And so when I went in, I was kind of like apprehensive because I'm thinking, am I going to love it or am I not? What camp am I going to be in? And then I loved it. I loved it because there were elements in it that I love in a story. Those vibes that I get. And I, of course, love Maricat. So I am curious. Now, your vlog that you did with The Terror, is it spoilery?
It is non-spoiler.
Okay, good. Because that way I can watch it, and get excited for it. But I definitely do not want to read The Terror unless it is in the winter months. I just think that adds the aspect to it. And Cliff raves about it.
Yeah, I could have never imagined that when I set, this idea up for a polar gothic that I would get not only extremely cold for us down here in South Alabama, winter temperatures, but snow. I mean, it was like the weather gods and the book gods smiled down on me when I scheduled this. But The Terror, now I will be honest, I started it at the beginning of January and I did not finish it until like last week.
Yeah.
It's a very slow read because you're getting different points of view. It is very much historical fiction.
And very descriptive. Very descriptive is what Alex told me. Descriptive to the point that it almost exhausts you.
Yes. But I felt like, I kind of read that like these men were like stuck on the ice for like 3 or so years. So you kind of feel like you're getting bogged down sometimes in descriptions. But at the same time, I was like, I'm just going to take this as Dan Simmons trying to make me feel psychologically trapped in some way.
Yes, maybe. I mean, that's a good point. That's a good point.
But it did send me on a deep dive into learning about the actual Franklin expedition. And that's not something I'm particularly interested in, that part of history. but it's not a book that I would have thought I would enjoy, but I did end up enjoying it. And it just really sent me on, like, driving my husband crazy. He says I didn't, but I don't know. But I'd be like, did you know blah, blah, blah about, the history of the Franklin expedition? And did you know this would happen in temperatures like 70 below freezing? Did you know your teeth could like shatter and drive up into your brain? Did
Oh
you
my
know this?
gosh.
Did you know that? And he was just like, no, I didn't know that.
But thank you for sharing.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Well, I love that you are exploring all of that, and I will check out that vlog because, like I said, I mean, I'm gonna have to reshelve, the terror because
It needs to be over.
January is almost over, and on my channel, I will be kicking off Folklore February. I am also co-hosting the Mardi Gras Readathon again with Lori at Books, Ink, and Paper. My announcement video is going out tomorrow morning if anybody wants to check that out. And of course, just my normal, I'll have, have my weekly sprints on Wednesday and, some other things that are happening. So yeah, that's where I'm at. But let's see what Stina is giving a 5-star. Woohoo! Swank, when I read it this time, I gave it 4 stars. Still a high rating. And Jamie is thanking us for our thoughts. You've brought a lot of new things to think about on my next reread. Awesome. And it's a 5-star from me as well. I love hearing that. And Stina says, I really appreciate the different angles of analysis. Can't wait for your feminist retelling.
No pressure, no pressure.
And then Liz says, fantastic combo, thinking about so many things now. Yeah, I think you and Lauren could really add to us traveling down this path. I really do. I think it would be a lot of fun, honestly.
I do too. I just want an excuse to get everybody together. All these people I love, these creators that, I get to spend more time with. Sign me up.
Yes, I agree. I agree 100%. Well, thank y'all. Thank you, Jen, for joining me today for this chat. I appreciate you closing out the Nevermore Readathon with me. I mean, of course, we still have a few hours left. As I mentioned earlier, I will continue reading Poe until the end of January because I want to finish the reads that I have set aside for that. But I appreciate you being here and lending your expertise on Poe and all of your awesome analysis of the story. And I want to thank you, everyone that attended today, spending time with us on the Saturday morning and hearing our thoughts about a story that's near and dear to both of our hearts. And really do appreciate everyone that participated in the Nevermore Readathon. That means a lot to me. And again, thank you for supporting my channel. If you are not subscribed to Jen's channel, I highly recommend it. She brings a lot to the BookTube community. And I think you will not be disappointed in her content. So without further ado, I will say stay amazing and be adventurous. But please be very safe in your adventures, and we will see you soon. Bye.
Bye.